Phone call verification, tools for compliance. Cold calling in a spam risk world. If you lead an SDR team in 2025, you've seen the shift firsthand. Prospects ignore unknown numbers, carriers label legitimate outreach as spam risk, and legal teams want tighter controls before you scale dial volume. The result is that many cold calling services feel less predictable than they used to, even when the offer and targeting are strong. Phone call verification is the practical bridge between high-volume outbound and modern trust expectations. In B2B, voice still creates faster clarity than most channels, especially when you need to qualify, handle objections, and move an opportunity to a meeting in a single conversation. But the channel only works when your caller identity is believable and your behavior looks legitimate to carriers and analytics providers. That's why the best outbound sales agency teams treat verification and compliance as part of performance, not a legal afterthought. This matters whether you run an in-house cold calling team or you're evaluating a cold calling agency, an SDR agency, or broader sales outsourcing. The same reality applies. If your numbers get flagged, you burn rep hours and pipeline, regardless of how good your scripts are. A verification-first program is how we keep calling viable while protecting brand reputation. Why verification is now a revenue lever, not a checkbox. Trust in voice is measurably broken. Research cited by trusted calling providers shows 68% of Americans refuse to answer calls from unknown numbers, and other data sets show roughly 80% of unknown calls go unanswered. When your SDRs dial into that wall, you're not just losing connects, you're losing the compounding effect of conversations that create meetings, follow-ups, and referrals. Verification turns unknown into recognizable, which changes behavior in the moment the phone rings. Spam and fraud are the reason prospects act this way, not mere preference. In one widely cited annual call report, 28% of unknown calls were categorized as spam or fraud, with reported average losses of $2,257 per victim. That background threat is why local presence and number rotation, without governance, often backfire by looking like the patterns spammers use. The more your outbound resembles scam traffic, the more likely your legitimate sales calls are filtered out. When you do verification well, you can reclaim wasted dials and lift connect rates. Surveys show 78% of consumers are more willing to answer when caller ID displays a recognizable brand, and multiple enterprise-branded calling trials have reported lift ranges from 41% to 133% depending on industry. For B2B teams, that's not nice to have. It's fewer dials per meeting, more conversations per rep hour, and a clearer path to predictable pipeline. What compliance means in practice for B2B outbound. Many leaders assume telemarketing rules are mainly a B2C problem, but enforcement trends make that assumption risky for any B2B sales agency or internal SDR org. Regulators have pursued large enforcement sweeps and sustained action across the telemarketing ecosystem, including lead generators and upstream providers, not just the final brand making the sale. In one FTC-led initiative, agencies cited 167 cases and over $2 billion in court-ordered judgments tied to illegal robocalls and do-not-call violations. Operationally, compliance boils down to proof. You need defensible consent language, consistent capture across lead sources, and reliable suppression for opt-outs and internal DNC requests. If your web forms say one thing, your syndication partners say another, and your SDRs use a different script, your consent story won't hold up under scrutiny. The simplest fix is alignment. Get legal, marketing, and SDR leadership together once, standardize language, and bake it into every lead source and talk track. Stir-shaken matters here as well, but it's not the whole answer. It authenticates caller ID and attaches an attestation level that carriers and analytics tools can use to assess trust. And the FCC has expanded obligations, so virtually all providers must implement it or adopt strong robocall mitigation programs. Even with solid attestation, behavior still drives reputation. So compliance and verification must include cadence rules, logging, and ongoing monitoring, not just a one-time technical setup. The phone call verification stack and how to implement it. In B2B outbound, phone call verification is a stack: identity authentication, like STIR/SHAKEN, number registration with major analytics providers, branded caller ID, and consent/DNC governance that's enforced in your CRM and dialer. Treat this like you would email domain health, because caller ID reputation is now as important as sender reputation. Practically, sales ops should own the rules: max calls per number per day, warm-up schedules for new numbers, and clear retirement criteria for flagged lines. Implementation should start with an audit. Check how every active outbound number appears across major U.S. carriers and analytics providers, and verify your attestation level. If a line shows spam risk, pause it immediately, remediate through the appropriate ecosystem, and tighten dialer behavior before putting reps back on it. This single step often recovers capacity quickly because you stop paying for dials that were never going to connect. Next, standardize consent capture and logging so every record tells a consistent story: what the prospect agreed to, when, where, and what your SDR is allowed to do now. Call recording and consent logs are not optional in modern telesales. Without timestamps, source documentation, and retention rules, you can't prove good behavior when a prospect, an enterprise buyer, or a regulator asks. The goal is simple: the tech should make the compliant action the default action. When you treat verification as a revenue lever, you stop arguing about compliance costs and start measuring how many conversations you're getting back per rep hour. Playbooks that keep answer rates high without raising risk. Once the foundation is in place, the fastest wins come from tightening daily execution. Build a simple outbound compliance playbook that covers required disclosures, time of day rules, how to handle opt-outs, and exactly what to do when a prospect challenges consent. Then train it like product knowledge: on day one, reinforced in QA, and refreshed quarterly. Branded caller ID deserves a measured rollout, not a brand everything immediately mandate. Pilot it on your highest intent segments first: demo requests, active opportunities, and key accounts. Then compare answer rate, talk time, and stage progression against a control group. This approach keeps costs disciplined while building a clear internal ROI story for leadership and finance. Finally, ensure your lead sources match your calling motion. If you run a cold email agency motion, LinkedIn outreach services, events, and pay-per-appointment lead generation in parallel, your consent language must be consistent across every entry point. The cleanest programs align messaging, consent, and calling cadence so prospects experience one coherent brand, not disconnected teams operating from different rules. Common mistakes that quietly destroy caller reputation. One of the most expensive mistakes is assuming B2B outbound is safe from telemarketing scrutiny. The reality is that complaints and investigations don't care whether the call was B2B or B2C. They care whether the call was deceptive, unwanted, or poorly documented. The fix is to run every program as if it will be audited, document consent sources, maintain suppression lists, and have counsel bless your framework, not just one-off campaigns. Another common failure is relying on local presence or aggressive number rotation while ignoring verification and governance. Spammers use rapid number changes and high-volume patterns, so when legitimate teams copy those behaviors, carriers and analytics systems often respond the same way: labels, filtering, and fewer connects. A verified, well-registered numbering strategy can still use local presence, but only on top of sane dialer behavior and clear ownership of reputation management. The third mistake is treating call recording, consent logs, and reputation monitoring as nice to have. Teams often discover a problem weeks later after they've burned lists and rep time because nobody was checking dashboards or alerts. Assign an owner in sales ops, review reputation weekly, and maintain a playbook. Pause flagged numbers, remediate with providers, and adjust cadence before the issue spreads across your number pool. How to optimize verification like you optimize pipeline. Think of caller reputation as a living metric, not a one-time setup. Track performance by number and by segment. Answer rate, short call rate, complaint rate, opt-out rate, and meeting rate per connect. When you correlate those metrics with reputation signals, you can spot when a dialer change or a new list source is pushing you toward spam labels, long before the team feels it. Operational controls make a bigger difference than most teams expect. Limit calls per number per day. Introduce warm-up schedules for newly activated numbers, and retire lines when they show early signs of degradation, rather than trying to push through. This is the same discipline top teams apply to email deliverability, and it's how an outbound sales agency keeps performance stable while scaling. Verification also gets easier when your data hygiene is strong. Accurate contact data reduces wrong numbers and rapid hangups, which can contribute to negative reputation signals. And clean suppression logic prevents repeat calls to people who opted out. If you already invest in B2B list building services, treat consent metadata and call outcomes as first-class fields, not notes buried in activity logs. When to build in-house versus outsource, and how SalesHive approaches it. Building a compliant outbound engine in-house means owning legal review, consent language, DNC handling, number registration, branded calling, scripts, training, QA, and ongoing reputation remediation. Many teams can do it, but it's a real operational commitment, especially if you're scaling quickly or managing multiple outbound motions across an outsourced sales team and internal reps. If you're not ready to build the full stack, working with a specialized sales development agency can be the fastest path to compliant volume. At SalesHive, we treat verification and compliance as part of day-to-day execution, not a project that gets revisited only after problems show up. Since 2016, we've booked 100,000+ meetings for 1,500+ B2B clients by combining disciplined SDR operations with systems designed to protect caller reputation and enforce opt-out handling. That's why companies evaluating SalesHive reviews, SalesHive pricing, or even SalesHive careers often hear the same theme. Process and governance are what keep outbound consistent over time. Your next step should be a simple decision. Either assign clear internal ownership, typically sales ops, to verification, consent, and reputation with weekly reporting, or outsource to a partner that can prove their controls and give your legal team transparency. In both cases, the goal is the same: more trusted connects and fewer compliance surprises, so your B2B cold calling services generate pipeline without putting your brand at risk. When verification becomes part of how you operate, cold calling stops being a gamble and becomes a repeatable channel again.